everybody back to another segment of the road stories. No, this ain't 1965 anymore, but I'm going to tell you a story that had to do with those dates. Longtime hustler, voted best ever. Frisco Jack Cooney told me this story riding down the road with Billy and Cardona just after I'd beaten the wonderful Dippy Dave. Anyway, Jack was, and it still is, with Barbara Cooney. They were on the road for 40 years. He made more scores than anybody. I'm going to get down to it. Around 65, 66, I don't know, back in the day, Jack had heard about a guy named Mr. Thompson. Mr. Thompson lived in the Carolinas. Very small town in the Carolinas. Now I'm going to tell you what patience is really all about, because this is it. 3 months, folks, 3 months. So Jack hears about Mr. Thompson. He's a huge scorer, and he's a member of the country club golf course in that small town. What do Jack and Barbara do? They make their way to that town, and they know they're in for a long, long haul. Well, they get there, and Jack does whatever he can to get in being a bag boy at this country club. He knows that once he gets in being a bag boy at this country club, in other words, getting a job there, that he can talk to Mr. Thompson on a regular basis. And if he can talk to Mr. Thompson, he's probably going to end up in Mr. Thompson's pocket. So sooner or later, Jack always had that personality where he rubbed somebody the right way. He was great at talking to people and making you feel special. Sooner or later, Jack got the job. He was a bag boy at this golf and country club, and this is a true story. So Mr. Thompson comes in one day, and Jack introduces himself, and Mr. Thompson goes on his way. Sure enough, the next week, Mr. Thompson comes in. Jack says, "Hi, how are you?" and this and that. Jack never mentioned, "I'd love to play a round of golf with you." Never mentioned anything about pool. Another week goes by. Mr. Thompson finally says, "Jack, you're a nice, fine young fella. I'd love to play a round of golf with you if you ever have time." Jack says, "Mr. Thompson, that would be great. I would be delighted." So they play their round of golf, and sure enough, once a week now they're playing a round of golf together, the same day, every day. So Mr. Thompson and Jack are playing golf, and Jack never mentions a word about pool. Never mentions a word, knowing that that one day, Mr. Thompson's going to say, "Jack, you want to come over and play some pool?" What do you think happened? Literally about 3 months later, and this is how long it took to get this score taken off. 3 months later, Mr. Thompson says, "Jack, you've been beating here on the golf course. We haven't been playing for much, and they started gambling. I'd love to take you over to my house and play you some pool." Mr. Thompson was frustrated. He couldn't beat Jack playing golf, so he figured he'd hustle him playing pool. Duh. Well, anyway, so they go over to Mr. Thompson's house. That day, true story, Mr. Thompson blows $120,000. This is in the late 60s, folks. $120,000. 3 months. What's that worth today? Close to $1 million. So, moral of the story is, or actually it's a great story, you can't do that anymore, unfortunately. People can't lay it down unless they're superhuman. The reason being is internet, live streaming, cell phones. Unfortunately, we won't have many of those stories, but Jack Cooney was one of the best. He spent 3 months trying to take that score down, waiting for the guy to ask him, and he did it. And that's a true story.